Hey, I'm Tamara Kandaker, and this is The Decibel from the Globe and Mail. It's been a pretty heavy news week here on Earth, so I wouldn't blame you if you missed this. But it's also been a huge week in space. Actually, it's been a pretty big year in space so far. NASA's landed another rover on Mars, they managed to fly a helicopter from its surface, and we even got audio of what the planet sounds like. Over the weekend, China landed a rover on Mars. It's only the second country to successfully pull this off. China's arrival on Mars is a reflection of how ambitious its space program is and how quickly it's catching up to the US in the search for life on Mars.
You know, if we were to find signs of, even if the life isn't on Mars anymore, but signs that life got a start on Mars, I think that would drastically improve the odds of finding life elsewhere in the universe, for example.
Science reporter Ivan Semeniuk is on the show today to talk about why we should take the time to look up and be fascinated by Mars and its potential as a future outpost for humanity. You're listening to The Decibel. Hi, Ivan. How's it going?
It's great. It's good to talk to you.
It's good to talk to you, too. Thanks so much for coming on the show. So, Ivan, there was a huge moment for space exploration over the weekend when China landed on Mars. Can you tell me about this landing and what is it that they managed to accomplish here?
Well, this is obviously not the first time that anyone has landed on Mars, but it's the first time that anyone other than NASA has landed on Mars. And I think that is really a significant moment. I mean, the Chinese space program has been making big strides. And this was actually the first Mars mission from China. So I should say other nations have orbited Mars. You know, India's had a Mars mission. Of course, Europeans have had Mars missions and others. But landing is a real tricky operation.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a bit about what the U.S. is doing on Mars right now?
It is by far the most complicated planetary mission that's ever been done. It is a rover, and like its predecessor, Curiosity, it's entirely self-contained. You know, it just lands, wheels down, and starts becoming a rover. There's no base ship to return to or anything like that. Mm-hmm. If we go back to the 1970s, there was a lot of excitement in, you know, getting a spacecraft down to the surface of Mars, and the two Viking landers did this in 1976. Viking clearly showed that at some point in the past, Mars had a lot of water running around on its surface. There are dried up river valleys and lakes and signs of all sorts of water in the past.
Yeah.
You know, it could have supported life. The only question is, did it support life? Now we're at the point where they are essentially openly declaring, yes, we are looking for signs of past life on Mars. And the experiments that Perseverance is carrying is really aimed at that. And I think a key part of this is not just that it will be examining rock samples on the surface, but caching samples for return to Earth in the future for more detailed study. So that's going to be a really interesting challenge. And it means that over the next few years, Perseverance is going to be going hither and yon in this very interesting landing site, which was a crater that was once a lake and where a river flowed into the crater and left this big river delta, taking lots of different samples from different geological units and finding, you know, kind of an assortment that could be brought back to Earth.
So where have they landed on Mars, and what is it that they're trying to study?
Right. When we're talking about the Chinese lander, they've actually landed right in the middle of a big basin in the northern part of Mars, like a big kind of open plain. It's called the Utopia Plain. And it's actually not too far from where the Viking 2 lander, the second U.S. lander, landed in 1976, way back in 1976.
Nav is green for touchdown. ACS is green, 1.5 degrees per second max, 0.2 Gs. 8 feet per second. Touchdown, we have touchdown.
The objective for them is to do a lot of what you would have seen from the first NASA rover missions to try to characterize the surface, the geology. The rover, once it gets its wheels onto the surface, has a ground-penetrating radar, which is an interesting feature because then it'll be looking for signs of ice below the surface. We know that Mars has a lot of permafrost. It's going to basically be another data stream from Mars.
How does China's landing on Mars kind of fit into its broader missions in space?
Well, China's really going it alone for a couple of reasons. Politically, NASA really can't share technology with China. That's been a long-standing U.S. congressional ban. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of doing everything from scratch, developing its own full program. Obviously, there's a science benefit. I think all planetary scientists will be happy to see the data. You can never get enough data from the solar system, but there's clearly kind of a political prestige because it shows that China has the technical capability.
So let's talk about some of the other Mars programs. Who else is exploring the planet right now?
Right. So this was a busy year for Mars. The newcomers was the Chinese mission and also the Al-Amal orbiter, which is the United Arab Emirates mission. Mm-hmm. So it's the first Arab nation to put an orbiter around Mars. So it arrived safely. The U.S. mission arrived safely and China all arrived safely.
So coming back to the American mission, there is a little 4-pound helicopter called Ingenuity that everybody's been talking about because it was able to fly in Mars's atmosphere. So why were these flights so important and so impressive?
I'm so glad you brought this up because, as I was saying, it's the most complex mission that's ever been sent to Mars. In addition to the sample return and all these main science objectives, they've been demonstrating new technologies in the course of doing this mission. And clearly, the premier demonstration is for the first time an aircraft has been flown on another planet. And I think one thing that's made it especially interesting for all the space fans on Earth is, in addition to the pictures, the images of, the video of seeing this thing flying around, they have microphones as well. And, there's enough of an atmosphere to carry sound. So we're hearing the sounds of a flight on Mars. They call it kind of a Wright brothers moment, and I think that's apt in this case. It really is that kind of achievement. I remember years and years ago, I went up to the high Arctic in Canada where scientists were basically doing science and testing technologies that might lead to a future Mars mission way up in Devon Island in Canada.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time there was a team from NASA Ames. They had some aircraft with them, including a little helicopter. So this is almost 20 years ago now.
Wow.
Thinking about a future helicopter on Mars. So remembering those tests that I saw in the Canadian Arctic and now seeing that machine on Mars, that's also, it shows you how long it takes to get there, but also just, that these visions can eventually lead to something.
So right now we have two superpowers, China and the US, on Mars at the same time. Both have very ambitious space programs and they're rivals here on Earth. How are political tensions between China and the US playing out in the space race?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, in a way, they're sort of in separate universes. And I think to some extent they don't have too much to do with each other, or at least with the geopolitical situation, except that, where in a different world it might make more sense to collaborate and cooperate. That's sort of off the table right now because of the political situation. But we've been here before. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, these rivalries also accelerate space progress. If there hadn't been that geopolitical tension during the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States, who knows if anyone would have been to the moon yet? That very accelerated program to get to the moon really was all about politics, much more than it was about science or engineering. So I'm not sure if the same kind of space race is going to happen now. China is doing really impressive things, but the U.S. is still, largely handling the firsts. I guess the question is if China starts to really pull ahead or kind of exert a different type of presence, when we get to the point where there could be ongoing long-term presence on the moon. But, the Soviet Union-US rivalry eventually led to some cooperation. And when things were kind of warming up in the early 90s, that's when, Russia joined the space station. So who knows? There may be a more cooperative future somewhere down the road.
We actually haven't talked about how Canada fits into all of this. Mm-hmm. So, where are we?
Great question. Where is Canada in all of this? I mean, we have had a presence in space, typically as a partner with NASA, sometimes with other space agencies as well. And Canada has sometimes participated in Mars missions. I know there are Canadian scientists who would dearly love Canada to invest just a little bit more. The entire Canadian Space Agency budget is basically, could be contained within one, good-sized NASA mission. So we are having the impact that our budget dictates. But I know there are people who feel that Canada could be doing much more. So it kind of boils down to, what are the niches where Canada can see a unique role? Well, lately, one thing that Canadian scientists are looking at a lot is this whole issue of radar and mapping ice on Mars. Mm-hmm. That could be extremely important for a manned mission, for example, because if you have ice, then you have, a source of water. You also have a potential source of fuel because, you take the hydrogen and the oxygen in the ice and you've basically got rocket fuel there, so you can make fuel for your return trip.
The US and now China have landed. Others have managed to reach the planet's orbit. But Mars has kind of captivated humans since we first saw it, and we've been trying to understand this planet since the 1960s. We know that there is water on the planet. What is it about Mars that scientists want to understand, and what is the significance of there being water on the planet?
It's a great question, and I think there are many layers to that. Obviously in popular culture, there's a kind of romance about Mars. Mm-hmm. It goes back to H.G. Wells and Ray Bradbury and so on. It is actually the only planet in our solar system, the only other planet besides Earth, for which we can see the surface. Mars has a changing surface. It has weather. It has an atmosphere. It has ice. We can see the ice caps. Even a backyard telescope can show you the ice caps of Mars. So that's already very, very intriguing. But I think we could go a level further to ask ourselves, why it's constantly on the front burner in this question about life. I mean, if you look across the universe, we can see lots of places where there's no life, basically everywhere else. The moon is a good example. The moon is nearby. The moon is as dead as can be. There's no hope of life on the moon. And Earth, obviously, is just the opposite. Everywhere you look on Earth, there's life. So Mars is the marginal case. It's somewhere between the Earth and the moon. And the question is, what side of the fence is it on? Yeah. Was it a place where life could have happened or not? And I think by answering that question for Mars, we actually answer that question for a much larger subset of possibilities and possible worlds, some of which could be in other solar systems. If we were to find signs of, even if the life isn't on Mars anymore, but signs that life got a start on Mars, I think that would drastically improve the odds of finding life elsewhere in the universe, for example.
And is there any evidence at this point that there was life on Mars at some point?
There really isn't. Okay. But scientists don't often talk about this, but that's one of the other interesting ways that this planet kind of just pulls you in. You can never prove that life wasn't there. You just have to keep looking or looking more places and look harder.
Yeah. I feel like another thing we should talk about probably is how private spaceflight companies like Elon Musk's SpaceX are also working towards going to Mars and putting humans there. So SpaceX just successfully landed their Mars rocket prototype for the first time a couple of weeks ago. Elon Musk is one of the biggest promoters of this idea that humanity has to go to Mars and become a multi-planetary species if we want to survive. Can you tell me about what he is trying to do and how he kind of fits into all of this?
So that's another whole reason why Mars is in the focus. In a sense, there's a kind of a tension between our interest in Mars of the past, which is this whole question about whether it ever had life, and Mars of the present and the future. It's sort of the next most logical place for humans to go in space. In some ways, it may be the only realizable goal. It's kind of hard to imagine where people could go after Mars, because after that, it starts to get really, really hairy and strange.
In our lifetimes, I guess it's still kind of a science fiction, this idea that at some point we'll terraform Mars and live there.
I mean, I think it's plausible to think that the first people on Mars are alive today, that they, maybe they're quite young. Changing the planet is a whole other matter. That's like we're changing our own planet just a little bit with climate change, and we're having a hard time figuring out how to stop doing that.
Casting forward, what do you hope to see with respect to Mars exploration in your lifetime?
It's been really exciting to me as a journalist covering space and science to see all of the firsts that have to do with seeing a landscape or a planet for the first time. You could sort of imagine that over the past 10,000 years, humanity has kind of mapped out Earth's surface, and that was kind of the project that carried on for centuries here on Earth. And then it came to an end when basically humans made it to every part of the Earth. Suddenly, we're into this new project where there are all these new landscapes that human eyes haven't seen. And we still haven't been there in person, but machines that we built or that humans built with their own hands are now exploring these landscapes. And that is amazing to see new places for the first time. That's never been possible before in human history. And of course, at some point, that will also come to an end. We'll have seen just about everything there is to see in the solar system for the first time. And then there will be another gap of perhaps many centuries before anything goes beyond our solar system out to the stars. It's a whole other ball of wax. So it's been fun to be right in the middle of that initial reconnaissance of the solar system. And Mars is part of that.
Ivan, thank you so much. Really appreciate this.
My pleasure. Anytime.
And that's it for today. I'm Tamara Kandaker. Our producers are Madeline White and Kasia Mihailovich. David Crosby edits the show. Angela Pacenza is our executive editor. Thanks so much to Ivan Semeniuk. You can find more of his work at theglobeandmail.com. If you like this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you want to reach us, email us at thedecibel@theglobeandmail.com. And most importantly, wherever you listen to podcasts, follow us. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.